Hello and welcome to the circus.
Let's party every day, like there's no other way. Get drunk and play an extra show. We'll stay out every night and count the city lights until we go. No other way, 'cause it's all I know. 'Cause it's all I know. 'Cause it's all I know.
Mota Dapanakisi. Welcome into the worst interview show. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. I am hyped for this episode because I just finished watching back WrestleMania 40 for the fifth time. No, it's actually because we are finally on Apple, you guys. My gosh, it only took me a year to get my shit together and get us on Apple Podcasts. So we are officially on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So you guys can go find us there as well. And it would be awesome if you could drop a rating and review and blah, 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 blah. Help super kick that algorithm stuff. But more importantly, guys, I'm running out of ideas here. Just send me some questions. Hit me up with questions, guys. Would you rather than dumb shit? Send it to @JackLucenay on Twitter. Or if you prefer, you can always email worstsportschannel@gmail.com. Today on the show, very excited. We have a writer for Fantasy Pros, host of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, and collector for NFL All Day. Flying in is Andrew Hall. Welcome to the show.
Love it. Thanks so much for having me, Jack. I'm excited to be on the worst show ever. This is great.
Well, I'm not excited to have you, to be honest, because I hate Bengals fans. So
Totally fair. Totally fair.
I'm just kidding. But I will say, I've always said, out of the entire division, Cincinnati, I think, is the only team I actively root against. Whereas the Ravens, it's like we have the big brother respect of that rivalry, and the Browns are just it's like the little brother that can never compete. So it's we almost feel bad for them. And then y'all, it's because you just beat the shit out of us. I'll be perfectly honest. It's Vontez perfect, and back in the day with that defense, man, I hated y'all.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, it's been a rough go.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate you being here. Before we even get into anything else, I want to know, would you rather get stung by a bee every day for a month or by 100 mosquitoes just once?
And I got to be honest, this one, I saw it on the sheet and I was like, this is a wild one, but I am highly allergic to both. So it's not like that helps at all. I don't know if you can even see, but I've got all these little marks on my arm. These are from mosquitoes walking on me. They don't even need to bite me. They just need to touch me. So the twist though is
allergies though. Pretend you're not allergic and take that out of the equation.
That's what I was going to say. Because of my current situation, I'm kind of used to having 100 mosquito bites. So that's probably the one I would pick because it'd be over sooner. But if I was looking at this, if I wasn't allergic and didn't really mind, I might go for the bee every day because I feel like if you're not allergic to bee stings, and I have friends that aren't, it doesn't really matter. It hurts a little bit, but it kind of goes away. The only issue is bee stings do tend to last a little longer. So I like the question, but I got to go 100 mosquitoes. I just think that's going to be easier for me.
So it's funny because I feel like there was a time where I would have said 100 mosquitoes pretty easily, but that's happened to me before.
Oh, no.
It sucked. It sucked so hard. I was camping as a kid, and I fell asleep in the tent kind of during the day taking a nap. And at the same time, my sister came in the tent and then left the door open. So all the mosquitoes just came in, and because it was the middle of the day, I was sleeping on top of the bag, so they just feasted on my legs. And I woke up to what must have been I'm talking my legs, my entire bottom half of my legs were just covered, and it was unbearable. And it lasted at least, because there were so many, I felt like it lasted at least a week or two, and that drove me way crazier than the little bee sting. Okay, it sucks for 15-20 minutes, and then you don't think about it until the next day when you're like, why am I getting stung by fucking bees every day?
Yeah, since it's only a month, that is a fair point. If it was a year, it'd be mosquitoes easy for you probably, right? Like a year would be too long. Like
Yeah, no,
that's
I
not right.
actually so I increased it from a week to a month because originally
Yeah.
I had the question as a week of beast, and I was like, oh no, a week is easy. I would do a
Yeah, I would
week.
do a week of bee stings easy. Yeah, I'm with you on that. A month is where I draw the line though, and because again, I'm just more familiar with mosquitoes. I feel like I can just put on some calamine and be fine, and it'll be over in 2 days. You know.
And I've been stung by bees too, is the thing. So I feel like I have the experience of both. My dad is actually really allergic to bees. So like there was this one time we had nests in the shed and he needed his tools. He sent me and I got stung a couple times. And it's like I forgot about that the next day. The
Right.
thing I still think about to this day. I'm like, oh my God, that was the worst.
Fair. That's fair. I get your point there.
All right, so we've already gone a little bit in. Let's just start with some basics actually before we get in. Tell the people where we can find you and stuff.
Sure, yeah. So you can find me on Twitter, not X. I don't know what X is, but you can find me on Twitter at Andrew Hall FF. That's where I put out a lot of my content. On there, just trolling sometimes and just teasing people for fun and just having a good old time on the negative Xbox, as I call it. But no, yeah, I mean, you can find me. Sorry, you can find me on Fantasy Pros. I write 3 or 4 articles there a month, and then I'm also on a Dynasty Junkies podcast, which is actually recording that later tonight. So you can find us live. We go live on Twitter and YouTube every Thursday at 9:30. We are kind of every other week in the off season, but in 2 weeks we go back to every week. So getting people ready for the the preseason games and all that, and then we'll be coming to you live every Thursday during Thursday Night Football as the season gets here. So usually we say around halftime is when we start that. So if you're bored as all get out, which sometimes that is the case, come hop in the Junkies chat and start to learn a little bit about Dynasty again, maybe, and kind of get your plan together for the rest of the week.
So I'm gonna actually go completely off script here on the very first question, but I haven't had it what I would call a writer's block, but I just haven't wanted to do it. And I'm in a very luxurious position, I would say, in that the site that I write for, shout out to my boy Tyler Bradley, he runs Fantasy Football Advice Network, very much lets me like be my chaotic self of like, I might not write anything for 2-3 months, and then I might write everything for a month.
Yeah.
So how do you, I guess, regulate, especially because this is like the reason where, and it just kind of separating myself. This is very much a hobby for me. So I don't,
Yes.
Whenever I see like jobs or like paid writing jobs for like actual, I'm like, no, thank you. Because of what I just said, like I might not write anything for 3 months because I just don't fucking feel like it because there's nothing going on right now that interests me. And in a month, I might write 17 articles because I just have like a chaotic flow of ideas that period. So I guess how do you manage, obviously being a more industrious and balanced writer when you're having to do it for a real site?
Yeah, so I love that you call them a real site. They're all real sites,
Yeah,
man. I know what you mean, though. But yeah, come on.
Sorry, real site. Let me preface. That's a really
Bigger
bad
site?
Yeah, one of the big boys is what I really
Yeah.
meant. The one of the sites where it's like it's on the tip of, I'm like the only schmuck out here that doesn't actually know what Fantasy Pros is and does. I'm telling, because I live up in Quebec, Canada, and it's like a lot of this stuff is actually pretty new to me for like all of people's content. But like most people, I would say like 90% of the fantasy community, if you're like, what's Fantasy Pros? They're like, oh, I know that site. So
Yeah.
it's like fantasy footballers, you know what I'm saying? It's like there's certain names that just have that cachet. And so that's really what I meant, not to be an asshole to my boy Tyler.
I was just going to say, you threw him right under the bus. No,
That's what I'm saying.
we knew what you meant. You meant it lighthearted. So I'll say this, there's a couple things here. So first and foremost, it is a hobby for me too, right? I am the same as you. I see full-time jobs come up and I just retweet. I'm like, I am not applying. I do not want to do this full-time. I think there's enough space for all of us to have a voice here. That being said, I love people that do it full time. I love people that want to make it their entire life and do it as a career. I fully support that, but that's not me. I love having it as a part-time gig. It is more of a hobby, right? It's more for fun, and I don't want to lose that fun. But that being said, I mean, when I've written for a couple of different sites, Pro Football Network was one I wrote for a while. And there were some times where they would just say, write 3 articles, whatever you want. And that was the hardest part, was what do I want to write about? Like I got to the point where I'm like, what is even worth writing? Like you kind of hit on it, like nothing's happening. So at Fantasy Pros, the thing that I like the most is there's a content editor and they send out a list of article ideas. And so then it's kind of like, yeah, I'll take these sound interesting. And then they assign you specific articles and then you have to write a certain article at a certain date. I'm like, perfect. That's what I need is just a little bit of guidance and a nudge in the right direction. And I can write 1,000 words on almost anything at this point. I mean, it's just like, just tell me what to write and I'll write it. So that's where I feel like I'm really glad to have, that kind of structure behind it. And again, I haven't written for every site. I don't want to say that, you're better if you do or don't. I prefer that for myself. That's been very helpful. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. I can still write things if I want to, but writing 4 articles that I'm assigned a month, I'm usually that tends to scratch that itch, like I'm usually pretty good by that point.
I do like that because obviously I'm a writer at heart, and in general, before I even touched fantasy football, that was my original hobby ever since I was a little kid. So I love the idea of writing prompts. I feel like, again, I just write really fucked up shit. It's like, I love going into the ethics and thinking about things way deeper than most people. Like I wrote an article. It was basically, I saw the tweet about the guy who was like, he traded CMC to a guy for fucking his wife. Was at the end of the day, it was like, you give me CMC and you get to fuck my wife.
Oh man,
and
I did hear about that. Yeah,
I thought the idea of that and the ethics behind that, and just like that's a fucking story. So I wrote an article about it, and again, shout out to Tyler. Let me put that on the site, which I thought that was going to be the one that he told me no.
Now you got to keep looking for that line. You're not there yet.
I feel like I'm a habitual line stepper. So I love debating ethics, and since Scott Fishbowl is going on, and I've seen multiple tweets about it, I thought it would be interesting to debate the ethics of slow drafts. So I just let's just start with, I think there's some people obviously that take it way too seriously, and obviously the dynamics of life gets in the way. I think everybody understands that. Just as an example, in the Joker division, I feel like everyone's been great about it. It's a very super competitive division. Everyone is sniping everyone left, right,
Love it
too. So I honestly think the Joker division might be one of the most competitive, and maybe a winner doesn't come out of there just because we're all killing each other that bad.
Maybe.
But just like the logistics of we're all in different countries and everything, and like even last night, like I was trying to stay as hard as I could. I was trying to stay awake for my pick, but I was watching a movie and I was just really worn out yesterday. I passed out, and I woke up a couple hours later and I was on the clock. It was like 5 hours left. I made my pick. That's what a slow draft is for, right? Guys on flights, all that kind of shit. That's normal. But the flip side, some people just want to watch the world burn.
Yes.
I want to get your opinion on dudes draining slow clocks on purpose.
So this is an interesting one, right? I will say this. I usually am, and I think we're on the same page on a lot of this. I will usually say if it's a slow draft, I'm fine with people taking as long as they want. That's the whole point. There have definitely been times where, I get up in the morning and I see that I'm on the clock. I'm like, oh, great. And then I get distracted or I start getting ready or I just flat out forget, right? And then like 6 hours later, I'm like, man, who hasn't? Oh, crap, it's on me. Like that happens, right? So in my opinion is like, hey, live your life. Like I said, like that should be entirely fine. If I'm not checking into the site or I'm not, making trade talks, if it's a dynasty league or something where you can actually make trades, unlike Scott Fishbowl, then, hey, if I'm on the site and not making a pick, that's kind of a douche move. In SFB where you can't trade, there's no trade talks. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? So I kind of get some of the logic though, and to kind of flip this around the other way. I really hate when the Scott Fishbowl drafts end. I always feel like this little bit of longing that I wish I had it for longer. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, it's already over. Like I'm in the Cincinnati live draft that started on Saturday of last week. So we're 6 days in, I guess, at this point. And we're just about to start the last round. And part of me is like, no, guys, take your time. Like, let's not hustle this. You know what I mean? Like I got nowhere to be, like, what are we hurrying for? It's July. So I kind of see both sides, but to your point and to your pointed question, coming online and like getting in the group chat and being like, guys, I'm going to take the whole 8 hours just because some news might break. All right, come on. Or I'm going to take the whole 8 hours because I can. And you guys are all just being whiners. Like, no, that's different. That's intentional. I don't like that.
Yeah, no, I think there's something to be said. You kind of touched on it a little bit with the dynasty leagues. It sucks too though when it's a manager, and I get life gets in the way, but when life gets in your way 7 times in a row, like you're that guy where we know that every time it lands on you, we gotta wait 6 freaking hours for your pick. Like that's where I feel like also there's a little bit of awareness and courteousness that comes into play of like, it's like you said, like, hey, you look and you might forget and fuck up, and that's totally cool. Everyone accepts that. If you do that 10 rounds in a row, at that point, though, it's like it is on you to be like, hey, maybe make the pick when you fucking look at it the first time. If you know that you're going to be busy every single, you know what I'm saying? So,
well, the other thing I don't like is the back-to-back timeouts. You know, someone at one of the ends, you know, times out on their first pick and it doesn't pick for them. Or even if it does, it just keeps going on the second. I'm always like, oh, come on. Like, that's not right. Like, there have definitely been drafts that I've been in where it goes what feels like a whole day between picks. And I'm like, this is too slow. So I get the hate in that regard, but I tend to think optimistically and tend to think the best of people. And then I just generally go, if you don't like a slow draft, don't be in a slow draft. You know, like if that's going to bother you and you're going to be all emotional about it, then maybe this isn't for you. Go find a quick draft on Underdog and scratch that itch other ways. I will say this too, as someone who's in a ton of leagues and far too many, it becomes more fun to draft because I don't get to do it that often, ironically, even though I'm in a bunch of leagues. But like redraft is a very fun time for me. And so part of it is like, let's just start this in July. I've got, a month and a half to draft all of my teams. Why am I in a hurry? You know, when someone's taken all the time in the world, I'm looking at it like they're probably living their life. I should live mine, so like, let's not get too bogged down. We don't have to hurry. So why are we hurrying?
No, for sure. Like I said, I think there's a healthy balance of, like you said, live your life, but at the same time of also like, you can be courteous and like not be the guy that holds up the draft every single time. Right? There's balance just like everything in life. But I think Scott Fishbowl, especially, it's really hard as fantasy players. And I even literally just went through this of not tilting. I'm scrolling on Twitter and I see this guy who picked a kicker first, right? And immediately with no context, like my brain synapses are just like,
why?
He took a kicker first. It's not even the why. My brain skips past the why because I'm so used to fantasy, and I think this is a fantasy player's way of thinking. It's not even about the why anymore. I don't even give a shit why. It's immediately that, well, now I know that pick tilts the entire draft board. It tilts the first round, the second round. It basically is the reason like you talked about basketball. Underdog would throw that draft out for a reason because it throws out the
balance isn't there. Yeah.
The fair balance, exactly. The fair play, the integrity of that draft. And in this very specific case, and I want to shout the guy out. It was at Jeff Lambert 77. He took Evan McPherson in the first round because he auctioned it off to charity. He raised $400 for charity for that pick. So it doesn't. And I think people, and myself included sometimes, since it's a competition, we're all very competitive. I think that can really like play on your brain sometimes of, again, my initial reaction was to tilt. And I made kind of a joke of like, did you lose a bet to make that pick? And I wasn't that far off because it was like auctioned it off and the person in his own league bought it so that they could take a kicker, which then I thought was like, funny.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it can be really, really funny sometimes. Like I said, the tilt that comes in and just a reminder to everyone out there that Scott Fishbowl is a charity tournament.
Well,
charity tournaments out there.
Do you know Jeff Lambert though? Like, do you know who Jeff is? I'm sure you've talked to him before. Okay, so Jeff works for 4 for 4. I think it's 4 for 4. Is it going for 2? I always get him confused. It might be going for 2 now that I think about it. But anyway, he runs a fantasy site himself, and is kind of higher up in the community. I love that idea myself. I love Jeff doing that. I think Jeff is a terrific guy. I've talked to him a bunch of times. And I think that's just that's the essence of this tournament, is to raise money for charity. So again, it's like, oh, I'm not going to be upset with that. But again, as a Bengals fan, I was like, hell yeah, Evan McPherson, let's get that ADP. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's get that first round pick. I love it.
But yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up, is because exactly what you said at the end there is, and I think those are what assholes is, like, they just can't make that mental gap of like, this is for charity, guys. Calm down.
It's free for a reason, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, it's free. But at the same time, if you are playing in Scott Fishbowl, you should be going to make a donation to fantasycares.org. I don't do sponsors or promos or any of that bullshit, but I will say everyone should be going and donating to fantasycares.org. I'm literally waiting for just after my move, which is coming up like literally at the end of this month, and then after that I'll be making my donation. So
love it.
Yeah, just like I said, Scott Fishbowl I think is a very unique aspect of fantasy football in the community and everything. So that was just kind of a funny little story that I wanted to bring up.
For sure. Yeah.
As soon as my brain couldn't help, of like, I saw a kicker and I was like, ah!
Your competitive nature was like, why didn't I get that league? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I actually, it's funny enough of like, that's something I hadn't really considered, right? When I took the Joker division, for me, it was very much like, well, so when I started this channel, it was actually as the Fantasy Joker. That was like the original.
I remember that
title and moniker. And we have since evolved into simply being the worst, so that I could just be more representative of myself and my name. Because I really
think you are.
It's so stupid, but it was actually because I wanted the SEO on my own name, so that at least like if I Googled my name, my show came up. I
like that.
That's literally all I want. So
you are the brand. Yeah,
exactly. That was part of the reason for the pivot. But initially we were the Fantasy Joker. That's why I took that division. And then I don't think I really like thought it through, because then when I first got in there, Jeff Bell was in there, and then there were like a bunch of other, like basically everyone in that division, because it's a popular division. Like I don't think there's anyone in there that would be classified as a beginner.
Right.
And there's multiple people in there that are like content creators. And Jeff did actually leave the division. Not I joked that it was because it was too competitive, but it's because he went to one of the live drafts.
He went to Cincinnati. Yeah, he was at our live draft. Yeah, and he actually ended up making a trade for the draft picks. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter. Jeff is the only person I've known ever to make a trade in Scott Fishbowl. He got into the 9 spot and traded the 9 spot and 6 beers for the 2 spot.
Oh, okay.
And I just love that. Like that to me is a terrific trade. Like that's just for a great cause. He's buying beers for the guy who made the move. So that's Jeff Bell in a nutshell.
I didn't even know. Yeah, that's the kind of like trade you make in Scott Fishbowl. That's like, again, it's such a fun communal tournament, and like, yeah, people want to win, but again, I think the fun and the charity behind it, that's that's the essence of it. So I just wanted to really highlight that.
For sure.
But talking about like ethics and kind of the way people think in fantasy football, and it's funny because I literally just went through this with my boy Hoove. Shout out to Hoove too.
Oh, I love Hoove. Yeah,
me and Hoove have already hit it off. It's funny because I think our mutual love of professional wrestling has made it that like we understand how to argue without like hating each other, because I feel like
you do a promo.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's so funny because it's like there's been times where I have kind of gone at people, and I don't think I was taking it maybe the way that they were taking it. I just was like, this is the fun thing that we're doing. And as soon as like we're off camera, it's like everything's cool. But maybe it didn't come across that way. But me and Hoove had a whole ass debate and argument about JSN and Lad McConkey on who's going to have the better fantasy finish. And then Romo Dune somehow got involved too. But I actually bring this up because we're both very convinced that we're right.
Of course.
That's the thing, right? So that's the dichotomy of fantasy football that I think is hysterical. And because you put up a Twitter poll that was like, do you believe you are above or below average intelligence?
Right.
Okay. And as soon as I cast my vote, I knew what the answer was going to be. I was justified, and it was hysterical.
Yep.
There was like 80% of 251 votes believe they're above average intelligence, which by fucking math means it's not possible.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, that cracked me up because I was seeing a lot of people doing not just fantasy debates, but there's a lot of other things dividing us right now. And so I saw a bunch of people having debates, and it cracked me up because I'm like, do these people even know that they're both idiots? Do you know what I mean? Like I see some of these arguments, I'm like, you're both dumb as hell. And then I'm like, I bet they both think they're smarter than each other. And like, this would be a funny poll because you can't see the results until you vote. And so I honestly love that there was 20% of people that were like, yeah, I'm dumber. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's me. I still thought that was impressive.
I think that's amazing. Is like that type of honesty, but those are honestly the type of people that I identify with the most, is just people who know themselves truly, right?
Yep.
So
I was a big fan.
That was a really funny aspect of psychology and fantasy football that I thought was really interesting. But it'll bring us into, I actually have a would you rather question, and it's not on the doc, but it's related to what we just said. So this is actually an old one, and I'm going to try and remember it offhand here. It's a Klosterman question. So shout out to
love Chuck Klosterman.
Oh my God. Okay. You are literally the first person I have ever said a Klosterman question, and they were just like, oh, I love Chuck Klosterman.
I think I've read like 2 or 3 of his books back in the day. Just terrific. Yeah.
Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs is one of my favorite books.
Yes. Love that one.
Okay. That's where the Klosterman questions are from. So anyone out there listening, go pick up a copy of Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, and you will relate to 21-year-old Jack trying to find himself.
It's been a while for me too. I don't think I found myself yet, but I know the struggle, and I remember reading that book probably 15, 20 years ago.
So yeah, there were 23 questions that I asked everybody in my life to know if I can love them. That's like the name of the essay and all the questions, and there are a bunch of wacky questions. But yeah, the one that relates to the intelligence is, would you rather take a pill that makes you 20% smarter, but appear 20% dumber to everybody else? Or would you rather take a pill that makes you 20% dumber, but appear 20% smarter to everybody else?
Man, that is a tough one.
So really is perception or intelligence more important?
So here's where I kind of lean on a different direction almost. Like, I think ignorance truly is bliss. And I think the more you know, the less you know, right? Like there's this, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson always talks about it. Like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything, right? And I think the more that I've learned in life, the more that I've become frustrated with life, because I'm like, God, now I don't know that at all. Like, but being smart is also saying I don't know that, right? But being dumb and confident sounds awesome. So I'd probably take the be 20% dumber and have everybody think I'm smarter, because I just feel like that would be entertaining for me. And honestly, if I did take that, I wouldn't know I took it. So maybe that would work out for me. But I feel like sometimes I'm just too smart, not in a selfish way, but just like, I think we're all a little bit too smart sometimes. I just wish I was dumber. I feel like that might be better for me. I'd get through life a little easier. You know what I mean? Less thinking.
Yeah. So I'm going to out myself here because I voted on the above average side of the intelligence.
I would do the same. I think that's what almost all of us would do. We all feel like we're more than the average, but that's not how averages work. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know most people feel like they are, but like I actually know that I am. And so, but because of that, it's like, and it's like you said, like I very much, and I want to be very, very clear. I know my level. Like, there's levels to this shit, and I am nowhere. You're talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson, like that's
That's
the
a
level
whole other
beyond
atmosphere.
me.
Yeah.
But no, I have actually been tested before and everything. And it's like I actually fall in the legitimate category of above average, which is funny. It's like right before like that Mensa level of like actual smart people. I'm like right in that category there.
Nice.
So it's just to say of like I've gotten to a point where, especially online, of like if someone's convinced of how right they are, I'm okay with it. I just have let it go at this point.
Yep.
So I think I would prefer the internal knowledge of having my own, because I feel like if you took my current self and increased that knowledge by 20%, like now I am in that Mensa level. Like now I'm legitimately debating Neil deGrasse Tyson.
But
And
Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't think you're that smart, right? That's the whole problem, is that everybody thinks you're 20% less intelligent. So it's just, I feel like that would drive me more nuts. But I love that question. That's a good one.
Again, I feel like you try and overcome it with the debating, but I I just think there's a level of being secure in yourself, and maybe it's not even there's a level of confidence that becomes arrogance, I think.
Right.
It's really high. Again, everything becomes balance in life. I always say everything comes back to balancing. But we're getting into like really theoretical
We're getting
debates.
deep. I like it.
Let's pull it back, but not too far back, because I want to ask the actual would you rather that I had on the
Perfect.
docket. Would you rather have super speed or super strength?
Well, this one, I've actually thought about this in the past, right? This is like a classic question of would you rather be Superman or the Flash? Like would you this is a classic thing I feel like a lot of kids have talked about. Personally, I'd rather have super speed because I think I could do more with it. We saw, I don't know if you're a fan of the Flash or if anybody listening is, but you turn back time with speed, right? Like speed involves time. So you could actually travel through time. That's basically what speed is. Super strength, I feel like I don't know, that you're big, dumb, and clunky. Like I'd much rather be agile. So give me super speed any day of the week.
I used to agree with you, and I think I think as I'm getting older is I'm more wanting the strength as opposed to the speed. It's fun, and I think of myself. You said Superman, but I was like, yeah, but Superman's got everything. That's cheating.
Yeah, that's not really fair. Yeah.
I'm thinking more of like Mr. Incredible. Like
Yeah.
Mr. Incredible is a perfect example of like, and then like his son Jack's the one with like the super speed, and it's like, or wait, isn't Jack the baby? No, Dash. Sorry, I'm getting
Dash.
the name.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mr. Incredible and Dash, like between those two characters, I see myself more in Mr. Incredible the older I get. And as much as I would like the speed thing, it's like I don't know, man. I feel like this. I don't know. I think the strength is more a novelty thing, especially because like the speed thing, like you have to almost slow down for people to even see what you're doing. Whereas like the strength thing, like I pick up a car and everyone's like, "Oh my god."
Well, I
So
think it comes back to like, do you want to be the lead singer in your band or the drummer in your band? And I've always wanted to be the drummer. Like I always want to be the guy in the background that nobody knows about. So that's where speed comes in handy. I don't want people to know that I have that, right? But if you want to be a lead singer, you want people to look at you, strength is the way to go.
yeah, I can't play an instrument, so I have to be
Me
the
neither.
leader. So I'm gonna go with the super strength.
I can play a mean air guitar, but I don't think that counts.
All right. Before we get into like the draft part of the show, we still have a chunk of time here, and I wanted to talk about a subject that I think is considered more sensitive. And it's funny because I have like my own thoughts and theories on the whole situation from a very different perspective than what is actually being discussed. And so just to put it out there, first of all, I don't really know this kid either. I'm a little bit older than my brother's generation. Like my brother, I feel like would be on top with all these players, but I'm talking about Sketch.
Yep.
So he was one of these like YouTube creators, content creators. I think he's like a game streamer. As far as I know, he games and streams Madden is what
Yep.
he's
Call
gotten
of Duty,
really,
I think too. Yep.
yeah, some games that he's gotten really popular for. So recently came out, and it's weird because it's like I don't even know if it's actually been confirmed or not, or if
He confirmed it. Yeah.
he confirmed it. So he used to do, I guess, online sex work. We'll just call it that. Call it what it is. And OnlyFans, for I guess he did a gay OnlyFans is what it was. So I already have my own thoughts about how ostracized sex workers are and how ridiculous that is. That's a whole debate in and of itself. Coming back to the aspect that I wanted to actually discuss for now, and we can kind of touch on some of the other stuff too. I'm not afraid to, just to be clear.
Sure.
But the main thing I wanted to bring up was that it felt like he was so afraid of it coming out because of the perception and the blowback and the online bullying and harassment that he would then experience, and how that would play on his mental health to the point that he was having suicidal thoughts. And unfortunately, this is something that has become way more prevalent in this era, where I feel like my generation was the last generation that it really didn't happen very often to us. Like if it did, it was like once in a blue moon, there'd be like a random girl that was like on message boards every day, like almost going out of her way to like find that kind of content, and then like would take her own life. Or like, it would be something directly related with the school, but it was so few and far between in my generation. Whereas like now I feel like, unfortunately, it's become more prevalent because online media has become so much an aspect of our everyday lives. The only pushback I have at all with the sketch thing is from the very few clips that I saw, a lot of what he seems to do in his content is making fun of people. And I don't know exactly, because I haven't watched the content, right? I don't know to what level or extent those jokes go. I know Call of Duty is a fucking cesspool as far as online chats and the toxic shit that they joke about. So it wouldn't totally shock me if Sketch in his heyday has maybe made a few jokes that were, R-rated. Let's just put it that way, right? So back in the 90s, back in my day, like I said, because I feel so old now, we used to say a lot of shit to each other. It felt like when you were with friends and you had an understanding, you could say the fucking craziest, meanest shit that you could come up with that would get you banned in a second, in a heartbeat in 2024. And it was just kind of like a joking thing. And now, and I disagree that language does not evolve. I don't use terms that I used when I was fucking 10, just like the R word, or just like as an example, like homophobic slurs, because I have learned now as an adult what kind of damage it do to people. And so I disagree that the language shouldn't evolve. But at the same time, there is a little bit of, I don't know, the idea of like, you got to be able to take what you give, right? So if you put yourself out there as an online content creator who very specifically, again, becomes known for making fun of people in a sense and like doing your online games and shit, and then you're kind of like complaining about the potential of like, because it's, again, this is not me in any way supporting any kind of homophobia, but like, if you're out there in the fucking group chats and people start ragging on you because you had an OnlyFans at one point, regardless of whether you're male or female, again, there's certain aspects of like, if the joke lands, the joke lands. And
I'll jump in with this. I've seen some of Sketch's stuff. It is more on the lighthearted comedy side. It is a lot more on the, he's not necessarily trying to rage bait. He's not trying to, he's not meant to be controversial. He's kind of just like a weird character that he plays, like the Tuesday, your love brother, like just he's got this character that he does, right?
I've seen
And
that stuff. I've seen other stuff where he's like straight like
right,
roast.
where he's roasting people. Most of the stuff that I've seen where he's doing that, it's with friends, like you were mentioning, like it becomes sort of like a promo. Like it just becomes this like amongst friends, he can just say whatever he wants. And I think the difference too, and you sort of hit on this too, is that Call of Duty is a cesspool. Like some of that stuff is very homophobic, is very anti-feminism, and just everything about it is just the toxic of most toxic masculinity. And I think that's part of why this topic is even a topic, to be honest. One of the things that I've seen around, I guess, or the talk that I've seen around has been more on how people are supporting him than they're saying things like, I can't believe so many people were mean to him about this. And I haven't really seen that many people be mean to him about this. So it's kind of where like the story itself becomes the story. Does that make sense? Whereas like just the fact that people are being rude to him, I didn't see that. I believe it happened, right? Like I'm not saying it didn't happen. I know those communities can be terrible. So I'm totally understanding of that. But I feel like a lot of what I've seen is more on the positive and supporting side.
And the pushback that I've seen is that it's almost hypocritical of the support that he's received when you look at how people clown people like Mia Khalifa or like Lana Rhodes, who used to be porn creators or whatever, and then moved on from that life. And it's like no one will accept and
they won't let them move on. Yeah.
But Sketch, you know what I'm saying? So I get that aspect of it too. But at the end of the day, like I think online culture is toxic. People need to fucking touch grass. I miss the 90s when it was like, again, I always call myself like the last bastion of normal life. Of like, we had internet, but it wasn't fucking 24/7. It wasn't,
and it wasn't fast. Yeah, that's what I remember. Is when the internet first started. When I'm 42, so I've been around a while, right? And similar, it sounds like similar age to you, where it's like, growing up, I didn't have the internet until I was like 14. And then even then it was like a dial-up, which was barely able to download images, let alone songs or videos. You know what I mean? Like it was just a really slow, crappy AOL internet. It just wasn't great. And I think kids these days have it all different. We didn't get a lot of online bullying because it took forever to get online. Like it just wasn't a thing. But now it's very prevalent.
That was not my experience. That's what I mean, where it's like, for me, it was very much the last bash. I'm actually, you said 44. I'm 34, so I'm a decade younger.
Well, I'm 42. Yeah. Don't age me too far yet, but yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm 34. I'm 8 years younger. So I was born 1990. By the time I was able to use internet, which was about, let's say 2000, I'm 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
We had digital cable in the house. So internet was fast. We had MSN Messenger, but Facebook did not exist. YouTube was brand spanking new.
And nobody used it. Yeah.
There was no Twitter. There was no 24/7 machine of social media.
Yep.
And there were no phones in your hand. The phone was still plugged into a cord on the wall. Like if I want the phone, I had to get up from the computer and call someone. It was a very, you know what I'm saying?
In the 90s, we had car phones, right? Like phones that were like mounted to the car or like in a bag under the seat, and there was an antenna on the car. Like it wasn't a mobile phone, it was a car phone. Like, so I'm totally with you. Yep.
So that's why I'm saying, like, I feel like I had the internet and I played on the internet a lot, but it was so innocent back then. It was like, again, it was like, even on MSN Messenger, if you were getting like bullied, those were one-on-one chats that you could just like turn off, block the person, sign out, go outside. That's why it was like, there was like literally one girl that unfortunately liked her, and it became like national news. But it was, again, it was so new back then. It almost never happened. That when it did happen, it made national news. And now it's almost like normalized to the point where it's like, it hits the back page. So
yes.
It's shitty. And I feel like there's no, putting Pandora back in the box. So I think ultimately all of this is to say that first of all, if you're out there bullying people online to make yourself feel better, fuck you. Second of
Right.
all, second of all, though, if you are suffering from any of that, the first thing I always say is seek, mental health
Please. Yes.
help. There's online places like BetterHelp online and BetterHelp.com that you can do for like really low, cheap options. But even just, looking in your own community for any kind of outreach that you might be able to find if you need it, I always super recommend that. Obviously, especially men's mental health is something that I like to bring up on the show,
Yes.
so that doesn't get overlooked. And I think, I do think that's why Sketch's story resonates. And I don't want to seem like I am shitting on that in any way. I just want to, I wanted to highlight that, like, again, there is an aspect of accountability and responsibility of, like, you could also just back away a little bit from being an online presence at all times of life.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's like, no one deserves that. And so I do just want to say that, like, obvious, and the homophobia shit is just like, bro, that's
Aren't
so
we
fucking,
past that? Like, why are we still having
so
this?
fucking, honestly, like,
Ridiculous.
that kind of shit. I look at you, I literally look at people like that. I'm like, you're a fucking Neanderthal, and
Yeah.
I don't even have anything to do with you in my life. But before we get into like the draft stuff, let's uplift a little bit.
Let's get back to the fun. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get back to the fun. I was gonna say, are you going? But you are going. You're gonna be there, Andrew, at the Fantasy Football Exposition 2024 in
Yes.
Canton, Ohio, August, the weekend of August 10th.
Yes.
I keep wanting to say August 9th because that's when I get there, but it's August 10th and 11th.
Yeah.
But yes, so the Fantasy Football Expo, I'm very excited because for me, this is going to be a very weird experience where I'm going for my first time, but it's also going to be a reunion because I've had like 50 of these shows.
Yes.
So what is some of the highlights that you're really looking forward to at the Expo?
Well, obviously, the best part is seeing the internet in person. And I think we were just talking about some of the downsides of the internet and some of the negatives of social media, but getting to know some of these people over the course of literally years in some cases, and then getting to finally meet them and, get a big hug and get a beer and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's the best thing to me. I really do think this community, and the fantasy community specifically, is a really good space that has a lot of really good people. And I think it's really just great that we all get to come together, pretty much once a year and just sort of hang out and just forget about things.
Yeah, I'm super excited to go. I'm driving down from Canada. I've had this booked for months. Like, I'm even I was lucky enough that I was able to book at the DoubleTree, which is like one of the central hubs of the expo. So I'm super, super excited. But we've stalled long enough. Let's get into the draft.
I want my picks back, all of them. You pancake eating motherfucker.
So this is perfect. We were just talking about the Fantasy Football Expo, where there will be all of the fantasy analysts descending upon Canton, Ohio. But we are going to pretend that they're descending upon Jurassic Park.
Oh, no.
Because we are drafting a team of fantasy football analysts to escape Jurassic Park. And the losing team is basically whoever gets the most players eaten. So I'll throw this up on the Twitter machine after the show airs, and we will get people to vote on which team had the most survivors. So Andrew, being the guest of the show, you have the 101, and then we'll go back and forth.
Well, this is tough because it's not necessarily who's like the best analyst. So I got a little frog in my throat for some reason. I'm all verklempt trying to figure this out. It's not necessarily who's the best, but who could survive, right? And survival is different than fantasy analysis. So let's just be clear out of the gate. If I do pick you, it doesn't necessarily mean I think you're terrific at anything. I just think you might have a chance to survive. And if I don't pick you, I didn't think of you. I think the one I would probably pick first would be Scott Fish. We were just talking about Scott Fishbowl. I just think he's got the resources and the know-how and the experience to figure things out and could really be good at puzzles. And I've listened to him on the Commission Impossible podcast for a long time. Like I feel like he's got a really good brain that could kind of work us out. So that's going to be my first pick.
Downside though, his name is literally Fish.
Yeah.
That makes him a main course for the dinosaurs. No, I'm joking. Shout out to Scott Fish. I had the same thought as you actually. Of I want to go with an analytically driven leader for my team. I want someone who's going to be able to do some of like the planning and kind of pointing things out, figuring things out, getting people where they need to be. I'm going with the creator of Reception Perception. I'm going with Matt Harmon. So Matt Harmon will be my 101. Let's flip it back to you, Andrew. Who is your second pick off the board?
That's a great pick. Honestly, like I'm super choked up right now. But that is a great pick. He'll know the route trees of all the dinosaurs. He'll know where to go. Man, who would be good at survival? Well, I'm going to go with Joey Wright. So I think Joey Wright had a really good show for a little while. It was, oh, hi. And it was kind of like this, little character that he was doing. And I think he'd be really funny and entertaining. And I know him and Scott are really good friends. So if nothing else, I could at least die laughing from Joey Wright. That would be a good second guess for me.
I think Joey is a great pick also because of his movie knowledge. He's seen every Jurassic
For sure.
Park movie.
Yeah.
So he's going to know some things. It's funny because I'm kind of putting the band back together for this one. I got Matt Harmon, and so I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get James Coe, my guy.
There
James Coe also participates on Reception Perception podcast. But hopefully, if he makes it back to me, we'll also link to my next pick. So we'll kind of leave that in the chamber. Let's see if he makes it back, though. Andrew, who is your next pick?
I'm guessing he'll make it back if I had to get, because there's so many fantasy analysts, and I think we're both in just different enough circles. We should be all right. Let's see. Who do I want to go with next here? So speaking of Jurassic Park, I'd be remiss if I didn't take my buddy Craig Ruth. Craig is a great guy. I was actually roomies with him at our Airbnb last year for the expo. He's not able to make it this year, but I know he's a huge fan of Jurassic Park, and he would probably have all the different deep cuts and things like that to get us through and survive. So that would be my next pick.
Okay, so he did make it back to me. I'm very happy. I actually haven't even caught up on the episode yet. They just released it. So if you guys have not seen it, it's on, I think, Adam's Sick podcast. But my choice is Adam Rank. I'm putting back the Danger Zone. And actually, way back, once upon a time, Matt Harmon, James Coe, and Adam Rank were all on the NFL Fantasy Live show, which is actually how I discovered them all back in like 2013, I think.
There you go. I like that. That's a good pick. Adam Rank's a good pick. There's a lot of good picks. There's no wrong picks in this, but I love this.
So, Andrew, let's get your number 4 out.
Well, number 4 is going to be the guy that drafted beside me in Scott Fishbowl, one of my favorite people. And just, I feel like if I'm going to die, I would love a hug from J Mike before I go. So give me J Mike as my 4th pick. So that, the formerly of the Open Bar podcast, we're trying to get them back at 9:30ish on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, whenever they decide to go again. But yeah, I got to have guys I like. And I like J Mike. I think it'd be a fun time.
Okay. I need a guy in the chair. Every team's got to have a guy in the chair. So I'm going to go with the AI man. I'm going to go with Ronnie Evans.
God dang it. I was hoping to get him on the next one. Good pick.
Oh, I love
Perfect.
that feeling. The sniper.
I love that you sniped me on this of all things. That's terrific.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now I feel great about that pick. All right. Who is your last pick?
Well, again, like you said, you did take Ronnie. I was thinking I could wrap it up with Ronnie and he could make us laugh with some AI, because that's what I'm looking for. Man, that's tough. I'm going to go with Pat Fitzmaurice. I just think he's got a great brain about him. Pat and I are both doing the Kings Classic draft for Fantasy Pros this year, and looking forward to doing that with him and hopefully bringing that belt home to Fantasy Pros. But as an honorable mention, I would have taken Mike Tagliere if I could. I just love tags. He's one of my favorites. So in honor of tags, I want to go with someone else who's big with fantasy pros. And I think Pat would be a great addition to the team. So yeah, I'm happy with that pick. I think Pat would do a great job for me.
Man, I am. I'm tilting. I'm tilting on this last one. I'm like, I could go big name. I could go. Oh, no. I got to go with my guy. If I'm the worst, this guy sucks. I'm going with Chuck Bass.
I knew it. Surprised you and Chuck aren't already doing a podcast of this guy sucks and this guy's the worst. You know what I mean? Like just own it up. I love it.
No, it's perfect. It's just exactly. I just need someone that's going to be like-minded and thinking like me, at least. I need someone on my wavelength. So we're going to get Chuck Bass in here to round out the team. And then that way I have a fish too.
I love it. There you go. Well, and yeah, Bass, right? I like that. But Chuck was at the Cincy live draft also. So I got to meet him. He was wearing a Mike Allstott Tampa Bay jersey, which was just very standoutish. But no, that. Great guy. Big fan of Chuck and what he does.
Perfect. So before we get out of here, let's get some shout outs. Andrew, if you want to shout out any other content creators in the space, now's the time.
Yeah, so I really like what the football guys are doing right now. I know, you got Alfredo Brown and Dave Kluge and my buddy Jeff Bell and that whole team. They're really cranking out great content. Big fan of them. I'm also a big fan of the Fantasy Life team. I think that team is just coming along stellar. You got Cooter Doodles, Chris Allen, Ian Hartitz. Some of those guys I know in person and have met and all of that. And I just think that's a terrific team. So, and really anybody out there creating content is a good content creator. I always say this too, like, I don't like the word expert. I'm not an expert. I'm an analyst. I analyze things, and that means I'm allowed to be wrong. It means it's an opinion. It's not a fact, right? There's a lot of things I think that we get messed up online about trying to be correct. I'm just trying to have fun. I think that's kind of where I want to go with this. So Football Guys and Fantasy Life are probably two of the sites that I most go to for fun. And that's what we're trying to have here. So those would be the shout outs that I do. Other than that, obviously, like I said before, follow me on Twitter at Andrew Hall FF. You can follow me at Fantasy Pros and at Dynasty Junkies. We'll be putting out content there until I don't feel like doing it anymore. But until then, that's where you can find me.
If everyone else is fantasy experts and analysts, I'm the fantasy Muppet. So
there you go. The fantasy Joker.
There you go. Fantasy Joker. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. I can't wait to meet you formally in person when we go to the expo. It'll be great. Now you'll be number 53 of the people that I get to meet there. So it's fantastic. It's going to be such a party. I'm so jacked. But man, shout out to you guys, the listeners out there, for making it through the show. Again, follow on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Super kick those subscribe buttons. And until the next time, I'll catch all of you guys on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes